Calling all believers in the extraordinary, Paranormal M is your hub for first-hand encounters with the supernatural. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell to immerse yourself in a world of genuine unexplained phenomena. 2-foot-long praying mantis. It happened in Brooklyn, New York in the late 90s. I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade. S was around 4 years old. We had a back porch overlooking a small fenced yard and lawn. We'd get the occasional regular-sized praying mantis. According to S, one day she was playing in the yard while my mom was hanging laundry up in the back porch. Apparently, this thing just suddenly materialized right there in the middle of the yard, because S says she turned around and there it was. She just stared at it for a few moments, not sure if it was a toy or what it was. She said it looked like a 2.5 to 3 foot long praying mantis with big red eyes and tiny black pinpricks for pupils. When the fear finally hit her, she ran up the stairs shouting for Mom, as she could express at the time that it was just a big bug. My mom barely reacted, of course, because kids get scared by normal bugs all the time. Well, the damn thing followed us up the stairs. For so long I've imagined what that thing must have looked like. She was convinced that my mom, or rather she convinced my mom, to go inside with her. That's when Mom finally saw it. While she and S were watching it from inside through the mesh door, the praying mantis perched itself in one of the chairs on the porch. Not like on the top or the back of the cushion or on the armrest or something, just in the chair proper-like. When my mom went looking for a camera, all at once it just disappeared. I asked if it flew away or what, but neither of them had an answer. It was just gone as instantly as it showed up. When my dad brought me home from school around half an hour later, they were still hiding behind the mesh door looking terrified. I never got the full version of the story until she was older. For years she would become hysterical if she ever saw a praying mantis or even an image of one. I wonder about what this thing could have been or why it showed itself to my mom and her. I do know, however, that as I got older, I found that my mother was a very abusive woman. And her, I believe, suffered the most because of that. Makes me wonder if one of the people I've told this story to is right about it being maybe a demon or at least a bad omen. Double mirror reflection. We have a full-length mirror in our bedroom that my wife will sit in front of when she's getting ready to go out. She sits down and puts on her makeup and sometimes listens to music. It's angled in such a way that I can see her reflection in our bathroom mirror as I come out of the shower. I see the reflection in the bathroom mirror of the reflection of the full-length mirror, if that makes sense. A couple of years ago, we were getting ready to go out and I forgot a towel. I knew that she had washed all of the towels and I forgot to pull one out of the dryer before getting in my shower. So when my shower was done, I pulled back the shower curtain and saw her in the reflection, or the reflection's reflection that I was just describing. "Babe, can you get me a towel?" Now her back is to the bathroom, but I can see her look up into the mirror and just stare at me. Doesn't say anything, just a blank stare. "Babe?" Nothing. No response but that weird stare. I figured she was mad that I didn't grab a towel, so I walk out of the bathroom naked and wet and head downstairs to our first laundry room. It's on the other side of the kitchen. As I cross into the laundry room, I literally bump into my wife coming out of the laundry. Totally scared the shit out of me. "Why are you running through the house naked? I would have got you a towel." I can't remember my exact words, but it was something along the lines of, "I didn't think you heard me." So I walked slowly back upstairs and slowly peered into the bedroom, half expecting some ghost to jump out at me, but there was nothing. No one in front of the mirror, and no one in the bathroom. Reddit. My stepmom had a dog, a Bichon Cocker Spaniel, so fairly small. That kind of became my dog after my parents got married. My first ever dog I lived with was him, and I knew that he loved me. A couple of times in the 4 or 5 years that he was in my life, I'd saved him from some large dog attacks while on walks and saved him from drowning, and I think he quickly realized that I would do anything for him to protect him. The house my parents bought and moved into has a basement, like most do, and this house is fairly new, like a decade or so. So it's not like a super creepy basement, dark and dingy, stuff like that. Before I moved out of my room, it was in the basement, in the corner where you could see the whole space and stairs from the doorway. There always felt like there was something in the corner of that basement, and every now and again my mind would see some sort of four-legged, threatening creature that would growl towards me, and something would just come at me. Usually the dog would be asleep with my parents in their room upstairs, but he started a new habit in this house of before going to bed, he would take a trip downstairs, kind of say goodnight to me, make a round in the open space, and then go back upstairs. Kinda odd, but the space always felt clearer after he did that. It was a habit that he didn't do before living in this house, but he never missed a night of it, even after we moved out. One very sad day, poor little guy died of cancer that came from nowhere and spread through him like wildfire. He was cremated and the ashes were spread all down by the river, the dog park that he loved. Even though I don't live there anymore, I of course could go to visit, and the basement has mostly been turned into an entertainment center, so we do spend a decent amount of time down there. I still get that feeling that the creature's there and watches us. One night, however, as I was leaving the entertainment area to go upstairs, I felt the presence of this thing again. Couldn't make myself turn around, so I kept walking, but a little bit faster. I swear, out of the corner of my eye, a little white dog rushed from my side to behind me. On the bottom step, I turned around and I swear I could see our dog sitting confidently, staring in the direction of the creature. He looked to me for a moment, and his face told me, "You had me, now I have you." He got up and walked around the corner, out of view. The feeling of the creature was gone, never felt it again. But every once in a while, I can sense my little man making his rounds. Ask Reddit 2. A few years ago, after I had graduated Bible college, a couple of college friends and I had been out for coffee and chatting late enough that the shop had to close. We didn't feel like we were done hanging out, so because this was the town that I had lived in for the past 12 years, my 3 friends asked where a cool place to hang out was. Preferably a place that didn't have, hours of operation, as it was now past 1 a.m. Didn't take long for me to remember this nature center near my old high school that had a beautiful walking path that went around a small lake. So I suggested there, and off we were. We parked in a public lot in front of the school so there was no risk of towing or tickets, and we walked across the football and track field towards the nature center path. Now, the walking paths were closed off by an almost complete fence, as you were supposed to enter by the main gates at the pavilion. But because I'd been in photography class in high school, we had found a way in for free that didn't also require a long walk to the pavilion about half a kilometer away. Just up the sidewalk beside the football field, the fence turned to cut through some trees. But in the trees, there was no fence, so you could easily get in if you were okay with a little bit of foliage. Just up the hill from this line of trees also happened to be the city's graveyard, which was also right beside a mental health hospital that was about 100 years old. So it hadn't always been the loving facility it now claimed to be. While my friends and I walked up the slight hill to the trees, one of them spotted the gravestones and inquired about what else was there. Immediately, everybody forgot about the nature center walk and we continued up the hill to see what this small cemetery had. And we had visited it during photography class as well, by the way. Being that I'm already sensitive to spirits, I gave a little prayer that the Holy Spirit would protect me, but also show me and us if there is an area that we should or should not go. We walked around the small section, occasionally feeling the need to pray for an unrestful spirit to be at rest, until we discovered that the cemetery continued up to the next level of the hill and actually stretched for a kilometer or so back. We continued to walk around, sometimes praying, sometimes just noticing the ages on the stones, maybe appreciating a cool name here and there. One of my friends, Eric, who also seemed to be sensitive to spirits, but whereas I was turned away by how negative and possibly dangerous some seemed to be, he was drawn to those same ones. Occasionally there would be plots where he lingered and I felt my spirit become heavy, but on those, we'd pray for peace, and once it felt clear, we'd move on. As we walked east toward the back of the cemetery, I could sense something very unsettled in the far corner. I prayed again for protection for mine and my friends, and we got closer, but I couldn't shake this growing feeling that I specifically was being watched by something in that corner. As we got to that last row, my friend ventured north to each plot, but I decided it was best to stay further away, fully aware that not only was this spirit unsettled, it was angry. I told them about it, and they prayed as much as they could, but neither of them could sense or feel it, so they prayed wherever I pointed or gestured to. Eric, however, seemed quite content to linger in that last row, even hanging back for a while as we moved on. As we turned to walk south, away from the angry spirit, I could feel the eyes burning into my back, giving me chills like I'd never experienced. I continued to pray for our safety, focusing more specifically on me, but it seemed that almost every word I whispered in prayer, the angrier it got. Until this point, any spirit we prayed over either found peace or at least stayed where it had been. Not this one. As we moved further away, I could feel it was just as close. My two friends decided it would be best to have one on each side of me, almost as protection. They had hoped that Eric was further behind, and that would cover my back. Well, it didn't. We kept walking, and it kept following, getting angrier and angrier as we went. I checked over my shoulder over and over, almost expecting to see some sort of creature physically following. But still, it was only a dark shadow, almost unnoticeable, almost excusable. There came a point as we neared the southernmost path that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I couldn't feel it anymore. It was gone. It was like it had reached its tether point and couldn't go any further. I breathed deeply and I relaxed. We were finally in the clear. We turned west and kept walking, and we could see our exit only a few rows away. My friend on my left got distracted by a cool gravestone and stepped away from the side completely, which I hadn't barely noticed. Then it touched me. Being suddenly surrounded by a spirit of fury, it grabbed my shoulders and it felt its hot breath as it whispered into my ear. I didn't even give it time to say anything. If I did, I would have remembered or understood it. I just yelped and jumped away, hopefully out of its grasp. All three of my friends jumped into defensive mode and prayed for it to leave me, and once it had been pushed far enough back, we booked it out to the exit. Just outside the exit, a security guard from the mental health home was looking in, probably concerned that he saw 4 young people walking around the cemetery. As we booked it past him, he asked if we were in danger, and we honestly didn't know how to even answer him, as most people laugh at us when we explain how real spirits and ghosts are. Not stopping to talk, we passed the man and continued back down the hill towards the school, the guard just staring into the cemetery, looking for what we were running from. The whole way back to my car, my friends were praying that if the spirit had attached itself to me, that the bond would be broken. And before we got in the car, they prayed more, and the whole drive home they prayed that it wouldn't and couldn't follow. And before walking into my apartment, they gave a final prayer that it was not welcome and couldn't enter. I was supposed to just drop them off, and they would drive the hour back home so they could work in the morning. They didn't leave me alone that night. and I don't think any of us really slept, even though it was stone cold silent until the sun came up. So I'm no longer allowed to talk about paranormal things in my household. I'm married, 23, and now I have 4 dogs. Because I've had quite a few things happen to me growing up. On July 4th, 2020, in Alaska, me and my wife, my buddy, and his wife decided to go to the hot springs and rent a cabin. While there, we came up on the subject of the paranormal, and I explained the things that had happened to me previously. We laughed about it, and I started playing around later in the restaurant. If you're there, flicker the lights. And weirdly enough, one did flicker hard. Ignoring it, I saw a bird feeder out of the window, and I decided, if you're truly there, make this bird leave, thinking it would fly away eventually. Instead, it got absolutely bodied by a much larger bird. Horrified, my wife decided that that was enough for me. That night, my buddy's wife had something tug her hair in her sleep, and had also seen something. My wife had something wake her up, but it was completely silent. After going home, our household there continued to have paranormal noises, and our 2 dogs at the time occasionally stopped and stared at the doorway with nothing there. Or where they were looking, they'd just growl and bark viciously, like hares standing on their backs more than I've seen when there's actually fighting or they're fighting each other or anything scary like that. Also, something wouldn't let my wife sleep for 4 days straight by pushing on her legs when she was almost asleep and making noises in the hallway. I even talked about it at her friend's place, and soon after that, had experienced paranormal things too. So consequently, I've been banned from talking about these things out loud. Not really sure what to make of it, but sounds like a Ouija board is the last thing that I should touch. Am I schizophrenic or just seeing ghosts? My family's always been said to be spiritually inclined, and I've always been on the edge on believing it, so I want people's opinions. The shadow figures that I've mostly seen in public, quite a few surround my house and reside in my neighborhood, but I've only really interacted with one. I was home alone, sick, out of my mind, and went to go take some meds. Then I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was a rough and urgent tap, so I turned around, and even though I was leaning on the counter, I saw a man walking up to the window. I got down behind the counter because I kept feeling something pushing down. And I raised so I could see, but not be seen, and saw that he had a pistol in his hand. I ducked back down and turned to see a shadow that looked like he had a fedora and a trench coat on. He disappeared after, and now he just stands by my house's back gate. There's 5 in my school, 10 in the middle school connected to it. I was in the middle school, and there was a small program called office work. We were like securities for APs and teachers, and they were working in the consular office. I went to pick a kid up from class. Once I stood in front of the room, but there were the 10 shadows. I wish I never took that job or that room. They said some terrible shit no human should hear. It made jabs at my body, and one said I would rape her if she wasn't so fat. The teacher didn't do shit neither, and neither did the students in the room. I told the other workers, and from then on, they'd been taking care of that room. But apparently a month after the incident, an old worker who left the school ran into the shit. I guess we're going to call these guys shitheads, ran into the shitheads, and they were talking about going through with what they had said, and got into a huge fight. the ex-workers, a group of 10, and the 7th graders group of 12. The ex-workers group, one being older. I haven't really heard of any of them since. The shadows at the schools have been showing up wherever bad things are just about to happen, so I've been avoiding them as much as I can. Dreams. I've had dreams where I talk to the dead, and I've cried even harder each dream. And each time I have a dream. The first time, it was my late grandpa on the night of my mom's birthday. I came out to the entire household 2 weeks before. I was in the park sitting on a bench when someone sat down next to me. I looked over and lo and behold, there he was. We hugged and talked a bit. I asked him what had happened after death, and he said that he couldn't tell me. But eventually he had to leave. But the last thing he said was, "Tell your mom happy birthday and that I miss her, and not to let my old hag get the worst of her. Also, congratulations on coming out. You'll make an amazing grandson, granddaughter, and grandchild." I wasn't out as gender fluid yet, but the fact that he knew made me sad that I couldn't tell him face to face, and even sadder that I didn't spend more time with him. I had a dream with several Asian ancestors from both parents, and they were playing poker, and they were making bets on grandchildren like my cousin getting into med school or my younger sister dropping out. They were all written on sticky notes on a wall. I talked to them about it, and one of them got up, I guess. "Oh, this reminds me." He got up and pulled 5 sticky notes from the wall. 1 with my name on it. Gets into culinary. 2, my name again, getting into a toxic relationship. 3, yet again my name. Toxic relationship. 4, my name yet finally, traumatized. And 5, I guess that wasn't finally, here's finally. My name is the first cousin to die. The 5th one took me back, and my grandmother, who was in hospice, walked in. Once I woke up, I was told my grandmother passed away in her sleep with a huge smile. This made me cry the most. I had a dream where I was watching a Victorian kidnapping/murder, whose death was passed off as suicide, and ran from the killer, where they were safe for a month and eventually killed by an uncaught killer. They didn't tell me their name. They didn't talk. They just sat with me and wrote her will and wrote to me in a notebook. But I couldn't find any source other than a photo of her tombstone in real life. I watched as her life was taken from her, and I couldn't wake up or move. I couldn't do anything. From that point on, I haven't had any more dreams for a month now, but the shadow figures keep closing in on the house over the past week, and I don't know what it means. I want to know if I'm just mentally ill or if I'm actually seeing ghosts. Ghost in math class. This happened when I was in 8th grade. I was sitting in my math classroom silently doing my homework. Keep in mind that my teacher had just yelled at the class, so absolutely no one was talking and no one was allowed to get up from their seats, no matter what. Strict teacher. As I was working on my math homework, and I felt a rather hard double tap on my left shoulder. I turned my head. No one was there. I sat in the back left corner, so no one could tap me from my left. The person who sat to my right was absent that day, and the person in front of me couldn't have tapped my shoulder. I would have seen them, and plus, they weren't allowed to get up from their desk. The teacher was also at their desk, so it couldn't have been them either. Before this experience, I didn't per se not believe in ghosts, but I was skeptical. But now that I've had an experience where literally no logical answer could be had, I most definitely do. Dream visits. My granddad was my best friend, And when my nan passed away, I promised him that I wouldn't let him be lonely, and I'd like to think that I was a pretty good granddaughter. I was lucky enough to have him in my life until I was 27. As I got older, we got closer and closer, so it completely destroyed me when he died. I was 5 minutes too late at the hospice and missed him last moment, but I'll never forget laying on the bed with him and hugging him when I did get there. My heart really did break that day. I had a very difficult time coming to terms with his passing, constantly telling my then fiancé that I just want one more hug, one more hello mate, one more anything. One dream I dreamt that I was going to go use the bathroom downstairs, and as I walked into the dining room, Granddad was just standing in the doorway. I ran toward him sobbing, and he simply said, "No." I said, "But I just want a hug," and he said, "If you hug me now, you'll always want another one. And you can't have any more." I stood there crying, telling him how much I needed him, and he just smiled that gorgeous cheeky smile of his, and I woke up. It felt and still feels so real. I'm so certain that he visited me, and it happened again 4 years ago. I had just given birth to my son, and I dreamt that there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there was my granddad, wearing his familiar clothes and leaning on his walking stick. I just stood in shock while he said, "Okay, Sam, let me see the boy." Loud crashes and scratching in the night. For the past week and a half, my fiancé and I have been hearing weird noises at night. They always happen around 3 or 4 a.m., and always in the same order. There's a loud crashing noise from the kitchen that sounds like plates crashing on the ground. Next is what sounds like our dryer or washer machine door slamming shut. Finally, we hear scratching noises around our room. My fiancé has claimed that she's heard footsteps, but I haven't heard them yet. I live on the 3rd floor apartment with no one above us, but we have someone to our side. There looks to be a crawl space/attic area above us, so maybe it's rodents doing the scratching and my neighbors slamming doors, but I can't justify the noise of plates crashing. Additionally, we're dog sitting and the dog ran out of the room early in the night barking and heading for the front door. I want to say that it was maybe a neighbor leaving or coming home. However, the dog was growling once we got to him, and we got him to lay on the bed until we got up for the day. My dead granddad spoke to me through the phone. I must state that I didn't believe in spirits or the afterlife until this moment. It's baffled me since it happened. Around 4 weeks ago, I was getting the kids ready for school and randomly had this sudden urge to go see my granddad at his grave. Like a strange urge which I've never had before. Until then, I hadn't been able to visit his grave in probably close to 8 or maybe 9 years or more. I'd say more likely 10 years. Anyway, I took my youngest son with me as he isn't in school or nursery yet, and we visited him. Spent about 15 or 20 minutes there, sobbed my eyes out while I sat in front of his grave. I never got to really see him as he died when I was 3. And I have like one pretty clear memory of him. So this was completely new to me, but something overcame me and I just lost control over my emotions. I said goodbye, cleaned his tombstone up a bit before parting ways. We got back to the car and proceeded to exit the cemetery. I must stress that the radio was on. There was no noise in the car at all. My phone was in the cup holder upright, with the case closed, so impossible for me to touch anything or catch something by mistake. My son was being quiet in the back, very rare for him, and we drove out of the cemetery. We got no more than 15 or 20 seconds down the road when my phone's voice, Bixby/Siri, literally said, "Hey, that was really nice spending time with you today. You've made my day." I pulled over in disbelief of what just happened and called my mom to tell her. When I couldn't hold it together and absolutely cried my heart out until I could drive again. It was a little creepy, but also very, very heartwarming. I met a woman I never knew visiting my mother's grave and greeted me by name as she left. Last Sunday, I was visiting my mother's grave, like I do every Sunday. I always take some flowers and gardening equipment with me to keep her grave in pristine condition. As I hang out there for a good chunk of the day, I know everyone that visits the grave in the same row my mother's grave is in. We all know each other by name and generally have warm conversations talking about family, how life's going, usual chit-chat. My mother's grave is in the last of the row and almost directly at the fence, with only a strip of grass separating it from it. And that allows me to look at her grave when I approach the gate. On that occasion, however, I saw a woman standing by my mother's grave and talking. Sadly, I couldn't understand what she was saying, but she was seemingly mumbling to herself. This obviously occurred strange to me, and I was curious, so I was well on my way as the lady came towards me, leaving. She was probably in her late 50s, shoulder-long gray hair and glasses. As I wanted to ask her what she was doing at my mom's grave, she beat me to it. She smiled at me and wished me a nice day while calling me by my name, not even interrupting her walking pace, but dropping it while passing by. She wasn't rude or creepy. Actually, it came off as rather kind, but it gave me goosebumps and a shiver. I just got a stumbling good day out myself. I turned around and saw her heading for the gate. I got to my mom's grave afterwards, and there were fresh sunflowers on her grave. I looked over the fence, but I couldn't spot her. I got to work and left the flowers I brought too. When I got home, I approached my dad about it, if he knows such a woman, relative of him or former colleague of her. He didn't. He just shrugged and suggested that she might know me from overhearing conversations at the cemetery. I also asked a friend of mine, with which I'm often together on the cemetery, to visit her relatives as well. She didn't know anyone of that description either. It's really a small cemetery, and generally, an everyone knows everyone kind of thing. So while it's not particularly creepy, unsettling, or frightening, it was very puzzling, at least for me, and the way I got a shiver really got the gears in my head turning. The ghost demon that kept following me. So when I was 14 or 15 years old, my parents owned a trailer. One of those that you attach to the bumper of a truck, so a travel trailer. I had bunk beds in it, and I would sleep on the top. We went on a trip near Cloudcroft, NM, during COVID. We went to get out of the house. On the third night, I remember getting up in the middle of the night. It was pitch black because we were out in the mountains. When I peeked out of the curtain, I could see this figure in the dark, and the only thing I could see is its piercing white eyes looking at me. I lay back down trying to sleep again, but not longer after do I hear scratching on the floor. I didn't get up, but I felt a presence behind me, as if it was just looking at me. I remember crying to sleep that night. The next encounter I had was in my own room. I was 16 at the time, and it was around 12 a.m., maybe to 1. I was just scrolling through my phone before bed, and I turn off my phone, and after 15 minutes of trying to go to bed, I open my eyes and look at the foot of my bed, and it was just staring at me. Again, I put my head underneath the covers, trying to get rid of it or make it go away. It was just observing me. I could feel its eyes seeing through me. My last encounter was also on a trip, this time to San Antonio. It was night again, but this time my parents bought a new fifth-wheel trailer, and I had my own room with the door. I was staying up on my phone once again, but this one is different. I couldn't get it all. But this one is different. If couldn't get in all I remember, interesting wording, is that I was scratching the door. Trying to get in, after a while, I think it gave up and thankfully left. I apologize for my abbreviations there. Owl shadow figure. The other night, I was getting ready to go to bed. Even though I wasn't really tired, I had to get up early for work, so I gently tried to force myself to sleep. I set my alarm for the next morning and closed my eyes. After 30 seconds of having my eyes closed, I could vividly see and picture my kitchen. I often have pre-dreams, dreams when I'm still conscious before I'm about to fall asleep, but they're never this vividly clear. Standing in my kitchen was this shadow figure. The shadow figure was looking toward my kitchen sink with its hands held out in front of its body. The shadow figure was standing pretty still, but after looking at him for a few seconds, he turned his head towards me. The figure had a large, dark, ominous owl head attached to its human-looking body. Since I was still conscious, and now slightly unsettled, I opened my eyes. After trying to analyze what I just saw, I tried to re-enter this pre-dream to try to investigate why this shadow figure is in my home. But I was unsuccessful. I believe that my home has a few spirits, but I've never encountered one like this before. I tried to research if anyone else has documented seeing an owl shadow figure, but I can't seem to find anything. I discovered that there is an owl deity called Moloch, whom practices child sacrifice, but the illustrations and descriptions have no resemblance of what I saw. Paranormal Hospital. I was a surgical technologist in labor and delivery for about 10 years. I worked for a non-for-profit Catholic hospital for almost 4 years out of the 10. When I first started in the department, 2 techs had already worked there for a very long time. We'll call them M and J, and myself, K, told me stories about Sister Mary Margaret, who was a surgery tech back when the hospital was still ran by nuns. Needless to say, Sister Mary Margaret was very much by the book and left little room for her coworkers' errors. Jay knew about Sister Mary Margaret, but M had worked there so long. She'd actually worked with the nun. M began to tell tales about instances when she'd heard Sister Mother Mary Margaret in the OR suite long after she'd passed away, and up to the current time frame. Being a born skeptic, I thought M and J were just hazing the new girl. I wasn't buying a bit of their nonsense. Well, fast forward to when I'm off of orientation and working my 12-hour night shifts. I'd be in the back, setting up the OR suite or stocking supplies, and I could hear the shuffle of shoe covers, just as high heels made the clack-clack sound. There's a very distinct sound that shoe covers make when they truffle along the hospital floor. I just sleuthed it out and figured M and J might pull one of their night shift nurses up to prank me, or just to see if I'd fall for it. Well, I just had to hop out there, catch them in the act, and let them know that they weren't fooling anybody. So, I popped out into the hallway, ready to scare the scrub pants off of whomever was trying to prank me. But when I jumped into the hallway, no one was there. There was no movement in the hallway. Swinging of the doors, chatter of the intercoms, nothing. Needless to say, I was really perplexed. So that first incident just kinda got a shrug from me and I went along working. As time passed, these incidents became more and more frequent. We had more new employees and M and J were training them. M and her new orientee had an incident where sterile supplies were on the OR bed and the bulb syringe floated from the top of the supply line at a 90-degree angle for about a minute and then dropped to the floor. I really began believing them that they relayed that story to me during a report. I could tell that they were both honestly shaken up by the whole ordeal, and I actually felt pretty bad for them. They were scared, trust me. These two were not actresses. There was no way that they could have given such an Oscar-worthy performance either. I continued having my own encounters with the shuffling shoe covers, unintelligible whispering, all of the hallmarks of a typical haunting. Some of my tech coworkers continued reporting the same kind of activity. None of the activity was as egregious as what M and her orientee experienced with the floating bulb syringe in midair. When this all stopped being amusing to me, when I went to the OR at about 2:30 or 3 a.m. to stock linens and sterile water and saline into the warmer. I'd done this 100 times. It wasn't anything new. For those of you who are not familiar with hospital warmers, they're equivalent to leaving the hospital and going straight to Narnia. These miraculous inventions are what makes your hospital blanket so nice and toasty. We also put sterile water and saline into the top portion of the warmer to heat up liquids used externally so the patient doesn't get hypothermic. To give you a visual, it literally looks like an industrial-sized stainless steel refrigerator. It performs in the same way, except instead of making everything cold, it warms everything up. Thus, the hospital warmer. I had taken the linen cart and some water and saline bottles with me to stock up everything. I left the cart in the hallway outside of our 2 surgical suites. The warmer was in between both OR suites in a little cubby beside our crash cart. As you very well know, hospitals are known for migraine-inducing bright light. This was one of the few things that I disliked about working in the hospital. Whenever I was able, I'd spare the blinding fluorescent lights as much as possible. So, I proceeded to stock the warmer without turning the lights on to spare myself the glare whenever I could. The OR suites were darkened and shadowy, but I could always easily get around. I'm sure everyone's familiar with refrigerators and freezers already, and they're aware that refrigerators pretty cold and the freezer part is obviously frozen cold. The warmers at the hospital basically work on the same premise. The refrigerator part warms the blankets, while the freezer part makes the external water and saline bottles really toasty. That's exactly what we want. So I opened the refrigerator part and expected to be hit in the face with some pretty arid heat. It was cold. Wait, what? Is it broken? It has to be. There's no way this warmer could be this cold. Something's not right. Then, I also checked the freezer portion, which should have been even hotter. It was actually colder. Nope, this isn't right. It was not normal for this warmer to be this cold. The fans were blowing warm air, but it just wasn't warming anything up. It was then that I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I'd never felt that way at a job previously. I turned around and looked up to see a black mist and smoke toward the top of the ceiling. At first I thought maybe some part of the warmer's electric had fizzled out and this was the beginning of a fire. The problem was, the black mist and smoke was on the ceiling and it was the opposite corner of the warmer. I looked at the warmer's connections and everything was as it was supposed to be. There was nothing wrong with the warmer. There was something in the OR suite cubby that was not friendly and rather malevolent. I knew it wasn't Sister Mary Margaret. She'd never do anything menacing. I can't explain how, but I knew not only that it wasn't her, I knew that she wasn't there to help protect me from whatever this was. It was slowly seeping down from the corner of the ceiling towards myself and the warmer. I did what seemed to be the most sensible thing and I began reciting the Lord's Prayer. It paused, full stop. As I continued, it looked like a film being played in reverse. It slinked back to the corner that it came from. As soon as it was just about gone, I turned to hustle out that little cubby area and back to the hallway. I happened to notice when I turned around to face the warmer, it was back to its normally toasty temperature. I didn't ruminate on it long. I just booked it out of the OR suite into the hallway and back to the nurse's station. Encounter with a witch in an Indian village. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I used to play with my buddy in a large field behind my house. It was winter when the terrifying incident occurred. The sun was setting down at 5:30 p.m., casting an eerie glow over the surroundings. My buddy and I had wandered quite far from home, and a thick layer of fog began to blanket the area. Knowing it was time to head back, we started walking, hoping to find the distant lights of our neighborhood. After a few minutes, we stumbled upon a small area filled with bamboo trees, a place we had seen before. In the middle of this eerie grove was a small pond. We grew uneasy as we realized that this was the opposite direction from our home. Confused and frightened, we turned around and ventured forward, our vision obscured by the fog. We walked carefully through the dried-up winter rice fields, barely able to see anything beyond our feet. Suddenly, we encountered an old lady in our path. She was hunched over, clutching a dusty cloth that resembled a bag. Her old sari was torn and worn, and she appeared to be a beggar. We approached her, thinking that she might be trying to convey something to us. But she uttered an incomprehensible gibberish. A really bad rotten smell filled the air. Looking up at her, we saw her eyes glowing with a sinister yellow-red hue, and she began to laugh maniacally. Overwhelmed by fear, we sprinted away, desperate to escape her clutches. After what felt like an eternity, we finally reached our home. Trembling, I recounted the horrifying encounter to my family. My grandmother's face turned pale, and she hurriedly sprinkled ganja water, holy water, on me, muttering prayers under her breath. She explained that we had just come face to face with a daini, a witch. The next day, I fell gravely ill with a high fever that lasted for an entire week. To make matters worse, my friend contracted a severe case of pox shortly afterward, and his condition far more agonizing than mine. Terror unleashed upon the village. 1950s, in the heart of a remote village nestled on the border of West Bengal and Bangladesh, a sinister tale unfolded. It was the time when Charulata, a mere 11-year-old girl, bore witness to a horrifying chain of events. Whispers echoed through the village's lips, tales of an old witch lurking in the shadows of the desolate riverbanks. She dwelled in solitude far away from prying eyes. The locals believed that the presence of a practitioner or witch near their village would inevitably invite malevolence upon their lives. That fateful year, a ghastly disease ravaged the village, claiming the lives of numerous innocent souls. While some dismissed it as a natural calamity, others pointed fingers at the dreaded witch, attributing the deaths to her malignant influence. However, such suspicions remained more speculation. One mournful day, a villager succumbed to the disease's grasp, and a few gathered to bid farewell to their fallen neighbor. They carried the lifeless body to the river's edge, intending to cremate it and release the departed soul from its earthly vessel. Fearful of contracting the illness, the mourners hurriedly retreated, neglecting to ensure the corpse was fully consumed by the flames. Little did they know what unspeakable horror awaited them. The following day upon their return, a ghastly sight befell their eyes. Not all the logs had turned to ash, and to their sheer terror, they discovered that the partially burnt remains had been desecrated. Speculation ran rife, as some whispered of the witch's insatiable hunger for bones and the macabre consumption of the deceased flesh. Yet, the true terror was yet to unfold. It was the scorching summer, and most people preferred to sleep with their doors open at night, so they could sleep peacefully because of the gentle, cool breeze. Among them was a young family with a darling toddler. Her parents made her sleep on a cushioned jute swing, which was present at the entrance of their room. Her parents slept right beside her. In the dead of night, the mother stirred from her uneasy sleep. She sought her laughter, only to find an empty swing swaying eerily in the silence. Panic seized her heart, and she called her husband, their anguished cries tearing through the stillness of the night. The village was stirred into a frenzied action as neighbors joined the frantic search for the missing child. A chilling realization crept over the crowd when dawn broke. A group of searchers emerged, their faces drained of color, words frozen on their trembling lips. Then the village gathered, sensing the depth of their despair. With bated breath, they followed the traumatized search party to a distant location, close to the meandering river stream. There, the scene unfolded, a sight beyond human comprehension, etched forever into their souls. The lifeless body of the innocent toddler lay sprawled upon the earth, her stomach brutally lacerated by a rough and malevolent force. Her eyes, once filled with joy and wonder, were now mercilessly gouged, a chilling testament to the sheer terror she endured in her final moments. Whispers spread through the crowd, their voices trembling with terror and disbelief. Some ventured to suggest that it was the work of a savage animal, a fox or a wild dog. But as the braver crowd went near the child, they realized that it was laid directly in the exact center of a symmetrical shape, drawn with twigs. Bad omen haunting my house. I must have been 7 or 8 when I had my first and probably only encounter with the supernatural. My father got transferred to Thetruthishere from Almora when I was 7 or 8. We moved into a rented place. Our landlord seemed sweet and helpful at first, but they were not like that at all. After a week or so, my mother started feeling uncomfortable in the house. Things would fly off the shelf on their own, and once a glass broke on my mom's hand and it made a cut as if someone deliberately cut my mom's hand. Our landlord's wife used to talk nicely with my dad, saying stuff like our family's the best, but would go tell my mom that we needed to leave as we're not welcomed right after my dad would leave for work. She was trying to drive a wedge between my mom and my dad. Things started to go a bit south, but we also did our research. Then the entire horrific story came out, including black magic. Before us, there was a couple that used to live in the same house. The landlords would play the same game with them like they played with my dad and my mom. This led to a huge fight between the couple, and the wife literally killed herself by burning herself alive. The situation worsened as the landlord's wife used to do black magic. She used black magic to control the guy, and brainwashing the man into not believing his own wife. It had been said that the husband was so brainwashed that he did nothing to save his wife and watched her burn alive right in front of him. When we came in, we knew nothing and moved in. After my mom experiencing things, I started seeing things as well. I used to see a Batman action figure everywhere at night, even on my bed when I didn't have any action figures back then at all. I was a car kid always. I always saw a giant doll in front of my cabinet. It was like 5 or 6 feet tall. It was there whole night. It was as if something wanted us out of the house. I don't know whether it was the woman who died or because of the black magic that we were seeing these things. But it was very strong and a very obvious presence. I'm 30 now, but we still sometimes visit the Thetruthishere, and that house is now empty. Even the landlords have to sell the place and went somewhere else. No new renter was able to live there for more than 2 months. We lived there for no more than 4. icky feelings and one weird experience in an old townhouse. Before my husband and I got married, we rented a tiny townhouse built around the 70s. This was around 2010. My husband is the definition of a skeptic and always worked overnight in a hospital. So he can't and would never back me up on this. But when I think about it, I still get creeped out. So the townhouse has a downstairs with a kitchen and a living room, with stairs straight off the front door that led to the 2 rooms upstairs. Everything was very open. You could spin around in the living room and see almost every corner. From the moment we signed the lease, I got a bad feeling emanating from the top of the stairs, which shared a corner with the door to the spare bedroom. A friend came to visit once and refused to enter the house after driving 30 minutes to see me, immediately, quote-unquote, feeling something peeking out at her from the spare room. She was pretty woo-woo, quote-unquote, and said that it was evil. I laughed it off, but can't deny my own icky feelings about that room and the top of the stairs. If I tried to watch TV in the living room, I could often feel someone looking at me from the stairs. I would run up them and across the hall to our room at night when we went to bed. One last very weird feature of the townhouse was that there was a cutout ledge of the bedroom wall. And you guessed it, it opened straight to the view of that icky spot on the stairs. And you could look down into the living room and the front door from there. So, here's the experience. I was asleep one night, and I woke to a super bright, quick flash of light from our closet. I thought it was a power surge, and I expected the closet bulb to be burnt out. But then it turned on by itself at regular brightness. At that point, I was scared. I decided to get up and just turn it off, ignore it, and go back to sleep. I was trying hard not to look out of the ledge, but I could feel that something was coming from the stairs. As I started to gather myself and sit up, I hear a click, and downstairs the TV turns on. My heart was pounding, but I just froze. The volume starts increasing on the TV like someone's holding the button down. In a few seconds, it was blaring loud. I just speed walked to flip off the closet light, down the hall, down the stairs, and grabbed the remote to turn it off. Turned around and ran as fast as I could back to bed. Nothing I can think of explains it. Nothing else that dramatic ever happened there again. But I did often feel the bed compress, like someone sat on it. And I haven't had that feeling anywhere else that I've ever slept. My room. So for some context, my whole life I've always had weird, unexplainable encounters. And to be honest, I think it's because my mom is kinda witchy and does some sketchy shit. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that I have an attachment. I live in a new house with different family members. This house has gone through generations of family. I don't think spooky shit happened when others were living here, so that's what makes me believe the attachment, because weird shit and vibes just follow me around. Anyway, to the story of my room. So my room is always the coldest or the hottest in the house, and it sucks. I've had shit fall off shelves and my TV will turn off or my light will flicker on and off, and I'll just wake up in the middle of the night to my closet door and it'll just be open whenever I come back from anywhere. Just regular creepy shit. But a family member told me something about a year ago that kind of freaked me out. It was the day after Christmas, like super early in the morning, and said family member woke up on the couch and went around the house to make sure everything was turned off and locked before she went to bed. She came upstairs and saw that my door was closing, so she just thought I went to the bathroom and I was closing my door back. So she checked the other rooms that came to see if I was awake, and she opens my door and I'm sleeping. So she says my name and wakes me up. I was pissed because, like, what the fuck? The sun is barely up, and she asks me, "Did you just come from the bathroom?" And I said, "No." And she just casually goes, "Well, your door was just closing." And at the time I was like, okay. Then I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next day I asked her about it, and she told me that after that happened, she went back to her room and her bathroom fan and light were on. She didn't leave them on, and ever since then, creepy shit's happened, like moving in empty bedrooms and the front door that we don't use just being wide open. Then she saged the house because she saw something dark following me around. Just creepy stuff happens. Not a lot, but yeah. So I've had a few experiences in my past. Can someone please explain? I have a couple questions about my own experiences. I don't have enough money to actually talk to a professional. My grandma was a psychic. My mother has experiences of her own as well, with speaking to spirits and such. My mother isn't open to talking about her experiences because she fears them and my grandma had passed away quite early. First experience. My own experiences have all been in different houses, though 2 of them have been in the same property. When I was maybe 4, I was up somewhere from midnight to 2 in the morning watching TV. At the time, I heard voices and looked out the window. There were some soft talking sounds and 3 yellowish-white floating orbs passing the window. I immediately ran to my room at the time and spoke to my grandma in the morning. She had told me that they were guardian angels protecting me. Second experience. I was in 5th grade when 2 of my grandparents passed away. One was the psychic. This was in 2016. I moved into that same house in 2020. I was sleeping on the couch in the room where my grandpa had his old library that we took out. I was drifting off to sleep when, clear as day, I heard, "She's going under." It wasn't someone's voice I remembered, and it sounded as though it was maybe the next room over. My parents were across the house, and at the time, it wasn't a good place for my mental health. Third experience. Later that year, after I had left the negative household, I was living with my mom. I was writing in my room when a tall figure with black hair had appeared. He was maybe 6 feet tall or so, and he had a pale face and dull, empty-looking eyes. Still to this day, I see him sometimes. He's thin, though, normal human thin. Every now and then, when I see him, he looks as though he had been drowned. It's strange. He's silent, but it's almost like he's watching over me in some ways. Possibly just watching me. I feel a weird unease around him, though. Strangely comfortable. I've had other experiences of hearing deceased family members' voices when I'm really depressed, though that's more comforting than anything. The state hospital / the hippie tree. This happened the day school got out in 2023. Me and my buddy Corey had made plans to go to 2 local haunted places in our beautiful Michigan town. One is called the hippie tree. It's a tree in the woods in our city, Traverse City. You can look up pictures if you like. It's a fallen tree that had graffiti painted all over the years. There's been many suicides, and it's alleged that it's haunted. Despite its story, it's actually really cool. Google describes it as a nexus for the unquiet spirits of those that once inhabited the hospital. Number 2 is the state hospital itself. It's nothing special, just a local abandoned hospital. Pretty sure it's been a few things, but the last time it was a mental hospital. Anyways, if you want to see what it looks like, just search up Traverse City State Hospital. To start the story, we were in Corey's basement, and it was around 9 p.m. when we went to the hippie tree to hang out and smoke the stuff we bought. After about 15 minutes of just chilling at the tree, the sun was setting, and we started our walk from the hippie tree to the hospital, which is probably about 5 minutes. During our walk, Corey kept saying that he felt something, like we weren't alone, and he never lost that feeling that whole time. Nothing really happened at the hospital, so I'll skip through that and move on to when we got back to Corey's house. We were in his basement watching Simpsons and getting high off our asses, when out of the corner of the dark room we both saw a face peer out from the stairwell. I have no idea what to make of this, but Corey believes that we brought a spirit back from the hippie tree that night. This happened when I asked. I really feel that I do have some type of gift, or maybe it's a curse. My daughter Delilah, who's 23 years old, has always had trouble sleeping in the dark to this very day. I believe her sixth sense, is what I call it, is much stronger than I allow mine to be. Previous to moving into this home that we now live in, we lived just a few miles away in another home. At the time, I believe she was a senior or junior in high school, and we were talking in her room. I remember it was afternoon, still daylight outside. Delilah was telling me that her light in the bedroom on the ceiling at times is flickering, and she says it spooks her out. So I decided to really ask a question, but I wasn't really expecting for anything to happen because, frankly, I feel like I'm in a bit of denial when it comes to my senses. So out loud I asked if there's anyone in this room with us to make the lights flicker twice. And what do you know? The light flickered twice. I can't tell you how fast my daughter and I ran out of that room. And of course, to this day, I'm stuck in between or in the middle thinking maybe it was just a coincidence. Or maybe not.